This episode of Family Trips is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada, because going big never goes out of style. Learn more at nissanusa.com.
Here we go.
Hi, Paji.
Hi, Sufi.
You went to Kentucky.
Yeah, we went. Mackenzie and I went, and we toured the Maker's Mark Distillery in Loretto, Kentucky. It's amazing. It's a historical landmark,
And it's a beautiful place.
Yeah,
But I have a question.
yeah.
How far into the tour are you tasting whiskey?
Pretty quickly, you dip this it's not a ladle. It's like a sort of. It's almost like doing like an oil change. You take this stick kind of, and you
Like
dip
a
it in,
dipstick.
like a dipstick.
Yeah.
But it's nicer than that.
Yeah.
And
I love a dipstick full of whiskey. Keep going.
And you go right into a barrel and you pull some whiskey straight out of a barrel and you try that. That's pretty early on. And before that, you have this like a full-on ladle that you can dip into this like uncolored sort of before some things have happened to it. Obviously, I didn't take in everything about this tour. I'm not giving the tour. But we were there pretty early in the morning. I think we showed up at around 9 o'clock, and probably by 10, I had some alcohol on my lips. And we were there on January 31st, and Mackenzie and I had been doing dry January. So to break it, the first thing that I had was some like
That's a good way. I mean, breaking dry January on a distillery tour.
Yeah.
Really says that it didn't take.
I will say I'm drinking much less overall since then.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good reset. And I've never done a dry January. I've never done a dry month.
Was it ultimately pretty easy?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, there's times where there's a lot going on in the world. The fires and just some global world news stuff that maybe might turn you to drink, but we didn't. So
that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think being clear-eyed. Also, let's be honest, sleep better. And sometimes the world is giving you a lot of reasons to not sleep well. So you don't need to help out. With that said, I do feel like, a distillery tour is still a kick-ass way to break a dry January.
And it really is beautiful. And we went all around the property. We saw, the farm, and we saw where they're growing a lot of their crops. We saw this, there are these grain trucks that come through and this big sort of mechanical arm, and they test that grain. And if it's not up to snuff, they're like, drive on. Not here. You're not selling that stuff here. Yeah.
You watched them turn a grain truck away?
I saw them sampling a grain truck. I didn't see them sort of have to tell a driver.
Do they have a grain guy who they sort of bring out, and he just comes over and he's the grain sommelier?
I mean, I'm sure they do. We hung out with the master distiller, Blake.
Wow. That's a good name for a master distiller. Do you think their fear is, in the early days, they were like, God, I'm just so afraid that we'll give the tour and then people will leave and they will know so much about it that they'll tell people and no one will come? And then they were like, you know what? Let's give them a dipstick full of whiskey and they won't remember.
Yeah. And then you forget.
Yeah.
You forget the last half hour's stuff.
Were there a lot of people on the tour with you, or was it kind of just you dudes?
We were on a very nice sort of VIP tour, so it was smaller. But they say they maybe have 140,000 people that go through there every year.
Get out of town.
Yeah. And the standard tour is, I think, about an hour maybe. Maybe it's an hour of walking around and then 15 minutes of tasting. But we were there like 9 to 5 or something like that.
Were you really?
Yeah. We went into some great, like cellar kind of things, like these barrel houses that are just cold and natural, and they don't do any sort of air conditioning or heating or anything like that. It's just all natural, and it's the way the limestone is in Kentucky sort of treats the water, and it's just pure and nice and good, and that's that Maker's Mark.
They invited me as well, and it's a little bit harder, 3 kids to get away and do a distillery tour. But when you were on that tour, I late at night after my kids went to bed, I hid in the pantry and drank it straight from the bottle.
Yeah,
just real quiet.
However you want to enjoy.
Yeah,
Maker's.
I mean, I think I should say you probably had a better experience, but I do think the Maker's was just as good for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to dip some bottles in the wax.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was
That's
fun.
pretty, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you really got to suit up for that because that's hot wax.
That is hot wax. Do you wear like big, long industrial rubber gloves?
You wear gloves and these sleeves and an apron and eye protection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I did a couple good bottles.
I have a question. Be honest. If you had seen one of your bottles in a store, do you think your reaction would have been like, "Oh, that one's real bad," or do you think it would have blended in?
Well, it's sort of like that sort of biologic thing of that you recognize your children.
Uh-huh.
And so I'd be able to pick my bottles out.
Oh, you think even today
Yeah.
you'd be able to see? Oh,
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, guess what time it is?
What's that?
It's time for another listener episode.
Oh, yeah. Hey, before we get into this, I just want to say, Mackenzie every now and again will look at some comments.
Okay.
And
of
send
our
them to
podcast.
me. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't look at them that often, but she sent me one that I thought was really sweet.
Okay.
So this one, the title of this one says, Josh breathes like a sick person.
Oh.
And then it says 1 star. And then it says, Seth barely lets guests talk and he's all caps, boring. Please stop.
Okay.
So thanks, guys.
You breathe? How many stars did I get on mine?
Well, that was one review.
Oh.
The title of the review was Josh breathes like a sick person, then 1 star, then Seth never lets the guests say anything. Boring, please stop.
I mean, I do appreciate that they spread out their criticism so that, if it had just been Josh breathes like a sick person, 1 star, I would have spent the rest of the day walking around kicking pebbles being like, he's dragging me down.
Yeah, also, if somebody breathes like a sick person in the two of us, it's you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a shocking outcome.
What do they think you breathe like if they think I breathe like a sick person?
One could argue I'm barely breathing. I told you, though, we're talking more about crazy shit that I'm doing. Did I tell you that Alexi and I mouth tape now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I'm gonna
Explain
say-
this to people who maybe...
So you mouth tape. You put a piece of tape over your mouth.
Right.
And it's sort of, it's breathable. Ideally, it keeps your mouth closed, but if you're worried about, you're not going to suffocate if you have a stuffy nose. Like your mouth will open and you can pull air through it. But the initial idea was it will stop you from snoring, which has been a problem. Not for me. I sleep right through it, but I think for Alexi, it's maybe a problem. So I was happy to give it a try. And as Josh said, I do breathe like a sick person. I've had congestion issues coming up 51 years. So it's not great, but I love mouth taping. I think I'm getting a really great night's sleep. I genuinely, I want to stress right now, you guys know, if you think an ad's coming, this is not an ad.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say, it's so not an ad, because there's a lot of companies out there. I'm not going to tell you which one I'm taping with.
Yeah.
But I really like it.
Yeah. Well, maybe if you own one of these companies, maybe you got to reach out. Maybe
reach out.
Figure out.
Yeah.
Would you switch the kind of mouth tape you're using if we had a sponsor? Yeah.
For money? Yeah. I would also, if somebody wanted to pay me just to stop wearing mouth tape, I would also. If the Institute of American Snoring wanted to reach out and be a sponsor, I'd rip that thing right off.
Yeah.
Anyway, Pashi breathes like a sick person. Also, have a little empathy. Maybe, again, we've talked about, you're living in a city that has been on fire. It's bad air quality. Maybe that's part of it, just in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
also,
I don't like the idea that I don't let people talk.
Yeah, I think you do.
It hurts my feeling. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see. All right. Waka, waka, waka.
Waka, waka. Hey, we're going to take a quick break and hear from some of our sponsors. This episode of Family Trips is brought to you by Nissan.
Hey, Sufi.
Yeah, Pashy.
What's that thing I always say about going big and it never going out of style?
Oh, I remember. Going big never goes out of style.
Yeah, that's it. And that's why we at Family Trips love partnering with Nissan, because they know that going big never goes out of style, especially when it comes to the 2025 Nissan lineup.
And the Nissan vehicle we want to give a huge shout out to today, the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X.
Sufi, what's that thing I always say about the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X?
Pashy, you always say that no terrain is too tough for the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. It's the most capable Armada ever built.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like your catchphrase.
Yeah, I'm known for saying that, and how could I not? With a new powerful engine, incredible towing capacity, and adventure-ready technology, this is the first Armada to earn the Pro 4X badge.
It's built for the most rugged of terrain thanks to the fact that it's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, which means it's ready to give you the freedom to explore further and to propel your adventures to new heights.
And my favorite part? The Armada's premium interior seats up to 8 passengers. That means we can bring our 6 best friends with us on our next adventure. Let's name them right now.
And we're out of time. So thanks again to Nissan for sponsoring this episode of Family Trips. Explore further with the Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Intelligent four-wheel drive cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions. Support for Family Trips comes from Airbnb. Man, oh man, Airbnb, they've really taken care of us in this podcast. We've had some of our best trips with mom and dad at Airbnbs recently.
Absolutely. I feel like I've had some of the best trips of my life in Airbnbs.
And, I remember when we got to the last Airbnb that we stayed at with mom and dad, I walked in the door and you had, on a giant dining room table, you had already set up a brand new board game. Now, again, we're a board game family. You've done some research, and it was one of those games with a million pieces, and I feel like there would never be a place in a hotel room to do this sort of thing, but it was just laid out, ready to go. It felt like a home away from home.
Yeah. I mean, if I had done that at a hotel, you probably, I'd have to lay it out on a bed.
Yeah.
And then you'd probably come in and just jump on the bed and mess it all up.
That'd be exactly what I would do.
Because it would be funny. It would be a jerk move, but it would also be funny. I recognize that.
It's nice when you're reuniting, be it with friends that you used to hang out with or your family that you used to hang out with, in warm spaces to go to an Airbnb and have that instant connection that you used to have in places that were not hotels.
Also, sometimes you're like, I don't know, is this place going to be okay? Well, then you should just try a guest favorite, and you know it's going to be okay because people aren't going to find a place that they were not impressed with and say, that's my favorite. So get yourself a goodie.
Book your next awesome trip today at airbnb.com.
Here we go.
All right, Sam, let's get into it here. What do we got?
Okay, well, first I'm going to actually jump off of, Josh, what you were talking about. Mackenzie had the right idea. So we have been encouraging
There's a lot of people have written in about your sick breathing.
Yeah. No, we've been encouraging people to go to our YouTube and subscribe and watch the videos, and people really have been. So thank you to all of our listeners. But people have been leaving some pretty great comments. So I picked out a few, and I'm going to read them to you guys.
Great.
Okay, so the first one was from Ronnie Chang's episode. This person said, when Ronnie said his family didn't take trips, I immediately knew this was going to be a rough episode for Daddy Boy. But in Ronnie's defense, a 23-year trip from Manchester to Malaysia is probably the longest trip in this podcast history.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think Dad will be okay with Ronnie Chang. In fact, I believe Dad has told me that he has since watched his special and enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
So Ronnie broke through.
Okay,
Daddy
good.
Boy.
Good.
Yeah.
Fear not.
Good. For Patrick Adams, Josh, this is for you. Anyone who hasn't gone to listen to the audio version of the podcast, that was before we were putting the songs up on there, in all caps, do it now. Josh was absolutely firing on all cylinders for the closing tune, and it is an all-time great. This person was loving the closing song for the Patrick Adams episode.
And then they said, obviously it's probably going to be his last one based on his breathing. He's not going to be with us much longer.
Yeah. Well, all right. We did get this.
I think that was a Snoop song, if remembering.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love
that was a good one.
specific
I was
shout
happy
out.
with that one.
All right, great.
Seth, this one's for you.
I don't like the way you're already sighing.
From our listener episode 9, Seth, as a New Mexican, I will say you aren't going to the right New Mexican restaurants if you aren't finding more options than enchilada type foods. Sounds like you're having Mexican food. There's a noticeable difference. So this person was roasting you.
All right, I'm gonna roasting me much like they roast their green chili peppers.
And
The
put them
green
in
chilies,
everything.
not green chili peppers. Sorry, I don't want to be get that wrong. All right, I will look into it. But again, I just go where they take me. So I will accept
Fair.
the burn, but I will also turn the burn on my. I will say, like carne adobada. There's a really good place in Brooklyn called Ursula, which is a New Mexican restaurant, and we that chef is local, or I should say not local anymore, but he's native to New Mexico. And so I agree. There's different stuff, and I shouldn't have said that, but New Mexico is a wonderful culinary destination that I highly recommend.
I think that'll make this listener very happy.
Well, I fucking hope so.
Nice backtrack.
Okay, this was from the holiday hangout. Seth is my number 1, but Timothy Oliphant is viciously, aggressively, viscerally attractive and hilarious, and I need him to be the 3rd host of this podcast.
I've heard very good things about Timothy, especially from the end of the year episode with Ike.
Yeah.
From people that know us, from Boom Chicago people who know you, Ike, and I, and know how we talk. And they were really, shout out to Tim, who really hung with you guys.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I have a problem with this comment.
You have a problem with the next one? Okay.
Yeah, no, with this current comment, because I don't know if you guys are aware, I'm campaigning to be the 3rd brother on this podcast.
Yeah.
So it can't be
So you
Tim.
you don't want the Oliphant to just jump.
No.
Jump the line.
It's hard to compete with Tim Oliphant, So
Yeah.
we'll see. All right, last 2 comments. This was actually, Josh, the photo we posted of your pants. Someone said, I think Josh is becoming the icon we never knew we needed from your fashion show.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got that out there.
Yeah.
There is, there's a better version of that picture, and Mom and Dad just can't find it. And I felt bad because I texted. I was like, hey, can you guys take a picture of this and let me know? And apparently it's no longer on the stairs going up the stairwell. And
Shocking.
like 4 hours after I texted them, Dad was like, is this one okay? We've looked everywhere, and Mom doesn't know what else to do. And I feel like it turned into an afternoon's activity for them to try and find that picture. But
And can I venture one more move that happened?
sure.
They turned on each other.
So my saying, yeah, that one's good enough. Maybe save their
They've
marriage.
never looked for anything for 4 hours without turning on each other.
So I'm actually going to be home in a few weeks, and if I can unearth the better picture, then I will we'll get that up.
All right, cool.
And thank you.
All right, that's all for the comments.
Okay, great.
So we have a
What do we
couple
got?
stories that I'm
Great.
going to get to right now.
Hi, Seth. Hi, Josh. My name is Amanda, and at age 25, I lived in North Carolina with 2 kids under 3 and a husband in medical school. My parents had moved to Taiwan for 3 years, as one does, and my husband wanted to do a month-long surgery rotation in Poland. Also, as one does. I decided that rather than spend a month in a tiny Warsaw apartment with 2 kids and no Polish language skills, I would fly to Taiwan with my kids and stay with my parents on their dime, because they hadn't met my 6-month-old baby and they also weren't living on student loans. The first 14-hour journey to Taiwan wasn't too hard. I just had the stomach flu, so I held my baby on the changing table with one hand while I puked into the airplane toilet. My time in Taiwan was really beautiful and fun, although I don't think I can ever go back to the Splendor Hotel in Kaohsiung because of the unspeakable things that my potty training toddler did to a window seat there. But the way home was a real challenge. My flight was delayed for 4 hours in Taipei, so I missed my connecting flight to the U.S. in Tokyo. My little traveling companions and I wandered around the airport for quite a while until someone could figure out what to do with us and put us back on another flight to the U.S. on a different airline. As we landed at the O'Hare airport, my son woke up in the middle of a night terror and began wailing. So his confused crying is the soundtrack to this story. We had 45 minutes from getting off the plane to go through customs, immigration, recheck our bags onto another airline, and get through security. When I arrived in the security line, I still had a weeping toddler who was pretty much lying on the floor at this point, a 6-month-old baby bouncing around in a baby carrier on my chest, and I was trying to fold up my jogging stroller in half and hoist it onto the conveyor belt to be scanned. From across the terminal, I could hear someone yell, "Why isn't someone helping that woman?" We finally made it through, and I had 5 minutes to get to my plane. I strapped my baby into the stroller, picked up my toddler under one arm, who was now yelling, "I won't go on another airplane," at the top of his lungs, and darted across the airport, arriving at the gate just as they were closing the doors. I sat down in the chair and breathed a bone-deep sigh of relief. I was finally heading home to North Carolina. Just then, the flight attendant got on the loudspeaker and welcomed all passengers on their flight to Dallas, Texas. That was when I began to cry. Luckily, I learned almost immediately it was a mistake. They were a Dallas-based crew, and they had just misspoken. I was actually on the right plane. And when I wrote up my story to complain about the various flight mishaps that weren't related to my children, they gave me enough money to fly me and my husband to New York City, this time without any kids. 18 months later, our little family went back to Taiwan so my husband could see my parents and the cool country where they lived. This time, we were stranded in the San Francisco airport for over 8 hours on Christmas Day when the bathrooms flooded on our airplane and the water messed with the circuitry. So just as we were speeding up to take off, all the electronics failed and we had to be accompanied back to the gate by fire engines. We eventually made it to Taiwan and had another wonderful trip until our last night when I was sitting in my parents' formal dining room in their home in the middle of Taichung when something began moving in the curtains right behind my chair. It was an enormous rat, almost a foot long. I jumped up and literally ran screaming for my mother like I was a child who just had a night terror. My husband and my dad cornered the rat and killed it with a shovel. All in all, it was always an adventure when I went to Taiwan. Thanks, guys. I really love the podcast.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, Taiwan must be fantastic based on the fact that she's still telling us how important it is to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's like an ordeal.
An ordeal. I was so worried when she said I finally got on the flight with the stroller and one of my 2 children.
Really, like, kudos to those moms out there who are traveling alone with a couple kids.
And if there's a moral, it is try to help before somebody screams, "Why isn't someone helping them?" Try to not be standing next to a woman while someone across the terminal yells that. I remember once we were scrambling, I want to say in Madrid, and the kids were young, and actually, you know what? It was just me and Ash. There was no Axel. Ash and I were so sick, and we were running through the airport, and it was one of those things where you're in an airport you've never been in before, and so you just kind of believe nothing's more than 45 minutes away.
Right.
And I feel like the Madrid airport, at some point we said, "How close are we?" And I swear to God, someone was like, "Hours." It was just the most we've ever missed a flight. And
wow.
That was a flight home where I think Alexia had 10 diapers, and baby Ash managed to just like blow through them all on a 10-hour flight.
Yeah. What do you do to someone's you just start asking around, or is the flight crew? They must have some. It must be a standard issue.
I think,
thing.
And I think she timed it. I think it was like real touch and go, but we did go through all 10, but I don't think there was a moment where she needed to borrow another one. Yeah. And then on top of everything, I was so sick that I was just sort of like, I immediately fell asleep for 10 hours. Yeah. It was just like hot sweats. It was not I don't think it was her favorite day with me.
Yeah. I feel like the same way, they've got, you can request a wheelchair on a plane or something like that, but then they've got those little little cars, those little things to drive people from gate to gate. I feel like someone in Amanda's situation, the airline should have provided for a woman like that.
Yeah.
Also something, because I don't have kids, and I've never sort of been a babysitter or been in charge of a kid in this situation. But that has to be the way. But like, if you have to go to the bathroom and you have a toddler or smaller, they're always coming with you. That has to be, those have to be some weird moments. That has to be some real bonding.
Yeah, it's not great. I will tell you this. All three of my kids do this. I will take them. We were going skiing the other day. We had to stop at a cafe that we go to all the time, so I don't feel bad. For the sole purpose is Addie had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And we just knew we weren't going to make it. So I go into the bathroom with her, and she goes to the bathroom, and then I'm like, give me a second. Since we're here, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And she's like, okay, I will meet you outside. I'm like, just stay. Like, I had to stay for you.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm just going to pee. Like, it's going to be over in 2 seconds. But she's like, yeah, I will. She goes, I will open the door a little bit. I'm like, no. That defeats the whole purpose. Just stay.
Yeah.
So there you go. I took Addie. We went on a date the other day. And by the date, it's just, she calls it a date, which is just she and I hang out for an hour. And she wanted to go to a park that's 2 blocks from the house. Now, earlier in the day, Alexi had thought we were going to go somewhere else. And that ended up being closed. And she had said to Addie, like, you can take your scooter, but then if you're tired at the end, you can come home in an Uber. So anyway, she had said that based on this other plan. Now we're like 2 blocks from home. And I'm like, all right, it's freezing cold. And I say, let's head home. And she goes, okay, called the Uber. And I'm like, honey, I'm not going to call an Uber. We're 2 blocks from home. And she's like, Mama, send me the Uber. And I was like, all right. With the Uber is waiting for us. We got to walk to the Uber. And she's like, okay. And I just put her on my shoulders and carried her scooter and walked home 2 blocks. Right. And then we got to the front door and she was even more upset. She's like, no, where is the Uber? And it's so funny because I think there's this kind of parenting, which is like constantly, and there's a better word that I'm going to come up with. You just want to like prepare your kids for everything. You just want to lay out what the schedule is. And it's all well and good. Yeah. Until something changes and they feel as though they've been ripped off.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think she just like loves Ubers?
I just think she liked that there was another step in her adventure.
Right.
In her head, she was, So,
well, maybe next time. Just
maybe next time.
Uber. Yeah.
Yep. There you go.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break and hear from some of our sponsors.
This episode of Family Trips is brought to you by Nissan. Hey, Poshy.
Yes, Sufi.
Let's talk about some things that never go out of style.
Ooh, I love this game. Like
pasta,
bomber jackets,
high top shoes, jean jackets,
baseball hats.
You know what else never goes out of style?
What's that?
Going big. That's why we at Family Trips love partnering with Nissan, because they know that going big never goes out of style, especially when it comes to the 2025 Nissan lineup. And the Nissan vehicle we want to give a huge shout out to today, the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X.
No terrain is too tough for the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. It's the most capable Armada ever built. With a new powerful engine, incredible towing capacity, and adventure-ready technology, this is the first Armada to earn the Pro 4X badge.
It's built for the most rugged of terrain thanks to the fact that it's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, which means it's ready to give you the freedom to explore further and to propel your adventures to new heights. So thanks again to Nissan for sponsoring this episode of Family Trips. Explore further with the Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Intelligent four-wheel drive cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions.
Here we go.
All right, let's hear the next one.
Thanks,
Sam.
Amanda.
So the trip I want to share is actually not a trip I took myself. But years ago, my father, his siblings, and my grandfather took a trip to Karelia, the region where my grandfather grew up. Once part of Finland, it now belongs to Russia, and the purpose of the journey was to visit his childhood home. Though I wasn't there, we have the entire trip on video, and one moment in particular never fails to make me laugh. As my grandfather walked up the driveway, he narrated everything, pointing out familiar landmarks, reminiscing about his youth. But when he reached the house, instead of knocking, he simply strolled right in. Inside, a bewildered Russian family sat at their dinner table, frozen in confusion, as this elderly Finnish man wandered into their home, speaking a language they didn't understand. Despite the initial shock, nothing bad happened. They all ended up outside, awkwardly attempting to communicate. My grandfather, who didn't speak Russian, kept pointing at my cousins, frantically trying to explain that they attended a Russian-speaking school. He kept saying, Ruski skole, Ruski skole. And somehow, that bridged the gap. Though I never took this trip myself, watching the footage of the moment remains one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
So what did he think the house was? Did he think it was...
I know. I think he was like, so it was his old house, and he just maybe in the moment kind of forgot that you're not allowed to just walk into a house.
Yeah.
Seemed like he was maybe having an emotional reaction to it. Again, it's that thing. I don't know. Do you feel like you have an emotional connection to old spaces? Like if you saw our old house in like Okemos, would you have an emotional reaction to it?
I think so. I think I'd be a bit fascinated by it. I feel like someone came and looked at that house when we were living there.
Right.
But yeah, I feel like we've had a guest that said like, that would never happen. Or maybe it was like Sebastian Maniscalco was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like I would love to walk through our old houses.
Mm-hmm.
And I do recognize that it is a leap of faith that the owner or inhabitant of that house would have to do to let you in the door. And then in this situation of this story, like crossing a language barrier. Yeah, is another weird one.
I feel like, you know what, we should really have my father-in-law Tom on the podcast. Let's do a special episode with Tom and talk about the family trip where he went to Russia to pick up his son Tolya. He adopted Tolya, he and my mother-in-law, when he was 5 years old, and he went to a Russian orphanage. And it's the craziest story because, there's a language barrier as well. And the reason I bring it up is it's on video. You have this moment where this crazy moment where basically Tolya is saying goodbye to the woman who runs the orphanage, and she just is sort of patting him on the shoulders and saying, "Okay, be good." It's nuts. But I think that would be a very special episode.
Yeah.
So inspired by that story, we're going to see if we can lock down Tom. I think he's going to be a hard yes.
Yeah. And also, I don't mean to say about Sebastian's take on it that everyone should let everyone into their house. Because sometimes I'll be driving by an old friend's house in New Hampshire, and they don't live there anymore, and they haven't for years. And part of me wants to like take a picture of the house and send it to him to be like, "Hey, here's your old spot." But I'm always creeped out at being a guy who's holding my phone out and just taking a picture of a suburban house and worried about someone looking at me and being like, "What are you doing?"
Well, I think that when they do that, I mean, if you want it, like, I think the appropriate thing is to just scream, "I'm not breaking any laws."
It's free country.
It's a free country. Did you yell at the Google guys when they came to take their pictures?
Yeah, it's really funny. What a great scene.
Great scene. Thank you for sharing your story. Also, it's very funny to both it's not your house anymore, and also it used to be Finland. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it would be like if we went back to our, if mom and dad sold the house and the next time we went and visited, it's like, it's Canada now.
Yeah. And these people speak French Canadian and they don't. Yeah. Great story.
Thank you for sharing. I think we have one more story for you today.
Great.
Hello, Seth and Josh. I'm a big fan of the show. Here's my story. I grew up on the East Coast, and like many East Coast families, we would take an annual trip down to the Outer Banks in North Carolina. So we would brave that 5 hours of intense traffic to visit a beach that was slightly less crowded than the Jersey Shore or Virginia Beach. Now, my family always prided itself for our ability to stay on the beach all day. So we'd get up in the morning, and my dad and I would carry this giant pop-up tent, and we'd bring this big cooler bag filled with drinks and enough snacks to last us the rest of the day. We'd find our perfect spot preferably before everyone else got there, and we'd set it up and guard it very jealously, right? Now, when I was either 13 or 14, I found myself on that beach one day, looking out over the ocean. I had my Walkman on, listening to some angsty music and probably reading a Tom Clancy novel, feeling very, very cool about myself. Then suddenly, there was a flash of heat from deep inside of me, and beads of sweat started to appear on my forehead, and there was a twist in my gut and a pulse of a sphincter, and I knew I was gonna need to go to the bathroom.
Great.
Now. The problem was our beach house was at least 2 blocks away. You had to walk up the beach, climb over the dunes on this boardwalk, and then go through these winding neighborhood streets. And this was an emergency. I didn't know if I could make it. So I quickly got up and I paced back and forth, and I was weighing my options, trying to decide whether or not I could make it. And I walked down to the ocean, and I'm considering, like, can I just slip into the ocean unnoticed and take care of business there and get out before anyone notices? But it was a very clear day. The water was clear. There wasn't much wind or waves, and there were just people packed everywhere. And it was very obvious that was not going to be the answer to my problems. So I quickly scurried back to the tent, and as casually as I could, I asked my mom. I said, hey Mom, you got the key to the house? I think I'm just gonna go up to the bathroom real quick. My mom was reading a book, and so she said, oh yeah, sure, just a second. And she set her book down casually, and took her sunglasses off and adjusted her big floppy hat, and she pulls out the biggest bag in the world. This thing is full of extra sunglasses, suntan lotions, multiple books, Sudokus, pens, God knows what else. And she's just rummaging, taking her sweet time looking for that key. And I'm trying not to hop back and forth, and I'm feeling antsy, and I can just feel things pulsing inside of my body. And she says, oh, here it is, just as a flood of liquid exits my body. So I quickly grabbed a beach towel and I wrapped it around myself as tight as I could, and I snatched that key up and I said, okay, see you soon. And I scurried off down the beach with my flip-flops, making that little flip-flop sound, kicking sand up as I go. And I get over the boardwalk and everything seems to be okay. I'm checking the towel, it's holding right. I get to the edge of the boardwalk, I'm going through the neighborhoods, and the coast is clear. There's nobody in sight, and I'm just praying to the good Lord that nobody sees me, and I'm going and I'm flipping and I'm flopping, and all of a sudden I just start feeling the dam gives way, and there is liquid running down my legs and pooling in the soles of my flip-flops and kicking back up onto my calves to repeat this process. And I'm going through the neighborhood, flip, flop, and I turn a corner and I see these 2 boys playing catch. They've got their baseball mittens on. They're throwing a ball back and forth. And as I'm flipping and flopping past them, they both stop and they turn their head to look at me. And I swear, one of them throws the ball to the other one, and it sails over his head because he's staring at my legs. Eventually, I get back to the house and I assess the situation, and I am too much of a mess to go into the house without causing a scene. So I just go into the outdoor shower and clean myself off the best I can. And I take off some underwear that I had underneath my bathing suit, and I just chuck it as hard as I can over that barrier into the trees behind the house and hope that nobody ever finds it.
Seems like trees, they probably will.
I went back to the beach. And that was that. That's my story. By the way, my wife is Angelica, who sent you that data on your previous guests.
Thank you, Angelica.
So, she's able to provide detailed statistic analysis, and I pooped my pants. So
yeah, there you go.
There's that.
I can't wait for Angelica to give us more data, which is like longest story about shitting self. My husband. Now, Pashi, I think we've established this is kind of one of your moves.
What's that? Pooping my pants?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's one of my moves.
I feel like kind of a go-to of yours.
I haven't in a good long time.
That if I played that to my boys, they would laugh the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, the right move is going in the ocean.
Yeah.
Regardless of how clear. That's just, that's cruise ship. That's cruise shipping it. Because that's what those cruise ships are doing out there, everybody.
Yeah.
They're full of thousands of people just pooping in the ocean.
I think right? Even if it's clear water, you go out, you do it, and then just as cover, you scream, "Oh my God, that jellyfish just took a huge shit." And then you kind of move away.
Yeah.
But you keep going, it's one of the clear ones. You can't see it. It's one of the clear ones.
You go out as far as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, if you're there early. But yeah, I don't know, like digging a hole in the sand, that's another option. The notion that he thought he was going to go into the house when there was an outdoor shower is like, no, the outdoor shower, that's where you're headed.
Yes. That's accurate.
Yeah, that's rough.
It is nothing's worse than that moment of like, I can make it.
Yeah. It sneaks up on you sometimes.
Well, I will tell you this. I mean, if there's anyone to blame, it's Tom Clancy. I've never read one of his books. It didn't make me want to crap myself. just because of the drama. You know, you're reading, Ghost Protocol.
Pulse pounding
to the point that all of a sudden you're like, well, it's hit the nonstop action has reached my bowels.
Must be Clancy.
It must be Clancy. And then do you remember when they used to have book commercials for books?
Uh-huh,
because
sure.
Where Tom Clancy's new Hunt for Red October. It's the beach read that makes you shit yourself. And then just a bunch of testimonials.
Yeah. That sounds
those
like
those are our listeners, everybody.
Yeah.
If you ever want to submit your family trip story or just ask us a question, head to speakpipe.com/familytripspod. And it's just so lovely to hear from you guys. So please do that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. We will be back with you soon. And do enjoy the rest of your day.
Family trips with the Meyers Brothers.